Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all of you for coming. My name is Napoleon Bell, and I'm the Executive Director with the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission. We would like to thank you for being a part of this very important discussion and the series of these discussions that we've had here in our home here at 1111 East Broad Street. This discussion is the fourth Lunch and Learn in the series of the Silver Tsunami, Issues and Resources Affecting Our Aging Community. Our focus today will be on family and supportive services. Our CRC Education Committee chose the Silver Tsunami for the series because our office enforces the Civil Rights Code for the City of Columbus, and we understand that our aging community can be marginalized and discriminated against. So we felt providing information through these great panel discussions throughout our series would be very beneficial to the viewing audience. I'd also like to thank CTV for the filming and rebroadcast of this program, which will be on Channel 3 through Time Warner Cable, but then also Channel 99 through AT&T UVerse. Then also we'll have it posted up as soon as it goes to YouTube, so you can be sure to take a look at that also. I'd also like to thank our panelists in advance for taking time out of your day and to have this great discussion with the folks here, but also for the viewing audience. And our moderator will introduce you shortly. So speaking of the moderator, it is my pleasure to introduce her. She currently serves as the Community Relations Director at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and then also serves as the commissioner, within our Community Relations Commission. So it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Miss Angela Mingo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are joined by a panel of experts who support the needs of families and seniors throughout Central Ohio. Joining us today we have Ms. Holly Goldberg, representing Centero Caregiver Consulting Program. To her right, we have Ms. we have Ms. Jamie Cooney, representing the Veterans Administration Long-Term Care, Ms. Julie Wise, who's representing St. Stephen's Community House, Ms. Kim Conley, representing Catholic Social Services, and caregiver advocate Ms. Patty Callahan, who's joining us and representing the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. At this time, I would like you to join me in welcoming each of today's panelists. So what I'd like to do is start out by inviting each of our panelists to talk a little bit about their respective roles in their agencies and the services that each agency provides to our community. We'll start here to my immediate right.
Thank you very much. I'm Holly Goldberg, and my agency, I guess you could say at this point it has three names. Most people know me from Northwest Counseling Services, older adults program, which I had. But in 2013, Northwest Counseling and Dublin Counseling Center merged. So we have two offices, one in Upper Arlington, one in Dublin. And our new name is Centero, which comes from the Greek word from support, which is a perfect name for the program I'm here to talk about today. And our program is called Caregiver Consultation Program. And our actual caregiver consultant, Dan Brochetti, couldn't be here today, but I also work in the program. And luckily, it serves the entire county, all of Columbus, all of Franklin County.
Very good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamie Cooney, and I'm here from the Columbus VA. And of course, the VA is charged with taking care of our veterans, as you well know. And I am over the geriatrics department there, so we're really focusing in on trying to improve the quality of life of veterans who are aging and looking at what we can do to try to keep them safely in their homes. And then I will also talk about the caregiver support services that we have as we go along.
Good morning. My name is Julie Wise. I'm the Director of Senior Services over at St. Stephen's Community House, where we provide services for not only seniors, but for families as well as youth programs. Obviously, I'm here to talk about our seniors. We service mostly in the greater Linden area. However, we do support and collaborate with a variety of other agencies, like with Ms. Kim and Ms. Patty, and with the VA and with Ms. Holly. We are mostly a community resource center, and we provide a variety of services there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Conley from Catholic Social Services. I'm the program manager of our Supportive Services program. And what our Supportive Services program does is we service those persons 60 and older and provide the case management in order to keep them safe and independent in their home for as long as possible. So we do a variety of services. They're all licensed social workers that work for the Supportive Services program. We also do counseling out of our office. We also have our senior companion program out of our office, transportation in Licking County. We do a variety of different services, but as Julie said, I'm here today to talk about the senior services.
Good morning, I'm Patty Callahan. I'm with the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, and I wear a couple of hats there. I coordinate our family caregiver support program in our 8-county service area, which is Franklin, Delaware, Fairfield, Fayette, Licking, Madison, Pickaway, and Union. Your area agencies on aging are part of a national network, so there are 11 other agencies like us in Ohio. So we're a good starting point to find any kind of service that an older adult might need. And then I also provide general information and assistance to the community about resources for older adults. The agency really focuses on trying to help older adults have a choice about where they live and about what services they receive. And so that's where we're at, and we're usually, I'm usually at the end of the phone most days, fielding calls on everything from the actual home and community-based services like adult daycare and homemaker services and things like that, to sort of the more housing-related issues and sometimes crisis issues as well. The agency provides Medicare consultation around all of the benefits people can receive under Medicare too. And then we have a volunteer guardian program where we have guardians who volunteer to be court-appointed guardians of the person for individuals who are in care facilities and who really don't have someone to make their decisions for them.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies. So the name of this series is The Silver Tsunami. I'll lead with our first question. Why is there such a growing focus on our aging community members?
Well, I think giving us some statistics here, that 1/5 of the U.S. population will be 65 or older by the year 2030. People are living longer. The average lifespan now is age 79. People are not retiring at age 65 anymore. So you just see the population growing older, or baby boomers are entering into their 60s. And we're not as prepared as we should be. The people that are turning 60 now are not as prepared financially as they're not prepared financially to enter the older adult years. And so they're requiring a lot more assistance than you'll probably see in the coming years.
Would anyone like to add to those comments? Thank
I
you.
would just like to add, when I first heard about the aging demographics and the large number of people that are going to be in their senior years and how many Americans there are that will be working to help support them through taxpayer programs or through church programs. I was actually in my young 20s going to college and studying gerontology. And I think it's really wonderful that your commission has set up this series on the silver tsunami, but in fact, I think there's still a lot of our community, seniors included, that aren't facing the reality. I think maybe it's just part of human nature to sort of put on blinders sometimes, but we meet a lot of people who are seniors themselves that really haven't planned ahead on how to accommodate perhaps failing health or a disability. And then when the problem inevitably happens, it's really crisis management. Pardon me. So I think what we're all very interested in how can our individuals, families, and communities prepare so things can be smooth and peaceful and not a crisis.
I I agree. I think with it being the fastest population growing in the United States, I think one of the other issues that we're facing is the fact that they are putting a huge strain on resources that were not necessarily set up for this amount of people. So food, medical, housing, things of that nature. So not only are they not as prepared as we would like for everybody to be, and we are getting a lot of crisis, I think a lot of it is just the strain on the resources. There's not that, I mean, especially in the last 10 years, obviously it's growing. There's a lot more people in gerontology. There's a lot more physicians, things like that. But I also feel like we need more. And it's going to be a hard thing to catch up. You know, I think the seniors are further along than we would like them to be, and then we don't have the resources to help them with that right now.
Understandable. Well, in previous discussions, we talked about the challenges to aged community members. What are some of the challenges facing their families and support systems?
I think, again, let me talk again. Going with what I was saying, I think it's very interesting because we really have two sets of seniors. We have the people that are in their 80s and 90s and older. I do have several clients that are in their hundreds, right? And she was talking about people living longer. You know, that's a whole different generation. Those are people that came through the Great Depression, and those are people that, you know, the moms literally stayed home, and I think that was wonderful, but they also didn't pay into the system. So now their husbands or whoever have passed away, and they're living on the minimal amount the system can give them, which is not very much. So there's that generation. And then we also have the people that are now in their 60s and 70s that are still working on their pensions and are not ready to retire. So it's even though it's 60 and over that we service, it's two generations that we're having with that. So I think, as well as I think, you know, they say history repeats itself. So before it was like, you know, and the people that are in their 80s or 90s, they took care of the kids, and they took, you know, the whole family was around in town and all of that. And now I don't think that's really the case with the 60s and 70-year-olds. Plus, I also see a lot of seniors that are taking care of their grandkids as well as taking care of their parents. My parents are a good example of that. They're taking care of my niece, and they're taking care of their 84 and 85-year-old parents. They weren't planning on that. They didn't plan for that when they were working and, you know, raising their own children. So I think a lot of that goes into the whole generational thing, again, with the stress on the medical and the income and everything.
I think there can be some also challenges if you're an adult child who's now charged with trying to caregive your senior parent. That shifting role can really be hard to negotiate, can even lead to some tension sometimes. As you're trying to take on more of an active caregiving role, the senior may not like that. That may be hard for you. Research has shown that when you need to get involved in taking care of the personal care, that can really lead to a lot more stress for that family member needing to take on some of those hands-on needs. So that can be something that can be really difficult. And even just some practical things for family members that can be hard is getting the information that you need to help your loved one. You may come up against barriers trying to get medical information. Banking information can be a challenge. Just getting the information from your loved one themselves. They may not be wanting to share but need the help. So I think those are all things too that can be a challenge for a family member.
You know, if I could pick up on the comments about stress, and if Dan were here, I know he would say this too, but there's a lot of research out there now about the healthcare problems people suffer when they're under a lot of stress, and I'm talking about the caregivers now, and it's really more than one problem. One is it can be very physically demanding to be a caregiver, and it can be very emotionally demanding with a lot of worry. You're worried about a lot of things. Some of the caregivers are attempting to work full-time and be a caregiver, and then they have a lot of job stress. But the other thing that we've learned is a lot of times people who are caregivers keep delaying their own health checkups, preventive work, or they might have a problem that's already a problem, but they've sort of put off. You know, we've run into families where the caregiver badly needs cataract surgery, just for example, and it's very common, but because they've put it off because of the needs of their loved one, now maybe they're facing a crisis where they can't drive anymore, and then the whole house of cards kind of falls apart. So it's the problems with stress affecting health and neglecting health, and the economic problems with job issues kind of all come together and make it really tough for some family caregivers.
All very good points. You know, we often hear that the ratio of senior members of our community is growing. Is this impacting a family's decision as to elder care?
It is most definitely. I think a very telling number that I just really was a wake-up call to me is back in the early 90s, for every individual who was potentially going to need some assistance to remain as independent as possible in the community, there were a prospective 11 people available informally to help them out. By the year 2050, that's going to be down to 4. So what we're seeing now is a lot of, juggling, last-minute juggling of living arrangements, moving, clear across country, giving up employment to moving in with a parent. So there's a lot of accommodation going on here to try to meet the needs, particularly when someone needs round-the-clock care. We do have publicly funded programs out here and private pay services that can put in a lot of help for folks, but when it comes right down to needing round-the-clock care, then there's going to have to be a family member or somebody in that home that's there to kind of fill in the gaps. So there are many creative strategies out there happening to try to make sure that someone is safe in their home.
Thank you. Any additional comments from our panelists?
I just wanted to add, I know it's been mentioned, but to underscore it, there is so much more long-distance caregiving than in years gone by, and sometimes the out-of-state or out-of-town caregiver makes a very quick trip to Columbus, Franklin County because of a illness or an accident, and it's very hard for them to go to the hospital or deal with the immediate problem, as well as start making calls to arrange for more long-term services. And that trend does not seem to be changing. Families are smaller, and they really are spread out a lot more than they used to be, 40, 50 years ago.
We have more women in the workforce, and certainly caregiving has typically been a women's issue. In the past, they have provided most of the care when an informal care was needed. I think that that we're closing in on that being 50-50 with men now also providing a lot of hands-on care. But certainly with more women in the workforce, then that also has pulled on their availability to provide care to someone in the home.
Very good. And in noting the diversity of our panelists today, our next question is, how do your respective organizations help support families of aging seniors?
With our program, it's important that we identify the caregiver. Oftentimes, caregivers don't actually see themselves as caregivers. They might see themselves as a daughter or a son or a mother or an aunt or uncle, but they don't identify themselves as caregivers. So one of the steps is to help them identify themselves as a caregiver. Absolutely listen to their concerns and hear what they're saying. We also help in that we will provide services to the senior themselves. We will transport and accompany people to medical appointments, because sometimes that older adult doesn't hear exactly what the doctor says, or they're visually impaired, hearing impaired, or they are confused or have early signs of dementia. And we will follow up with a family member if the family member's involved with that person, and let them follow up with the doctor and make sure that that person keeps their medical appointments. We also help with monthly bill pay. That's something that sometimes you've lost a spouse, and that spouse has done all the bill pay for the person, for the family, and all of a sudden this person's stuck doing bills and not understanding what they're doing. So we send a person in and go and help that person write out their monthly bills, do a budget for them, and just help in that aspect. And it could be going to the bank and getting money out of the bank for them. I mean, debit card is sometimes foreign to some of our older adults, especially the ones in their mid-80s or 90s. They're just not familiar with that. We also help them with understanding Medicare and Medicaid, the different things that go on with Medicare and Medicaid, and help them sort out their bills and making sure that they're not paying more than they should. Sometimes it's getting them on a payment plan or helping them get the extra help that they're entitled to. We also link them up with needed resources. There are so many resources out in the community to take advantage of, but that's the family members may be too overwhelmed or not be aware of the resources out there. The senior themselves might not be aware of the resources out there. So we do that and help them link them up with needed resources.
So I'm going to piggyback on that because that's basically what I do. I provide case management and transportation. But for me, our biggest thing is making sure that the word gets out that there are resources out there. I think that's the biggest challenge that I see in my community or in our community with our seniors is just they don't know what the resources are. They don't know how to get in touch with people, caregivers and seniors alike, both. So we do a community canvas at St. Stephen's once a year where we go out in the community and literally canvas house to house and get our information out. I think there's a lot of other ways that we're doing that. We're doing it through the Senior Services Roundtable here in Franklin County, which is a wonderful resource as well. It's 720 members right now, and it's people, obviously, a lot of you are in it. I see lots of familiar faces. And that's a great resource. But basically what we do at St. Stephen's is connect with resources, connect with Catholic Social Services. Again, we're listening to the caregiver and the senior and the entire process to see what they need and who they need to speak with. So we are very much that connecting, making sure that they get to Kim or they get to talk to Ms. Patty and she can set up services or get them to the VA or get them counseling, whatever they need. So we're very much the community resource connector. So we're getting those people to where they need to go.
Wonderful.
At the VA, each VA now has a caregiver support coordinator, and at our VA, her name is Georgianne McCrary, and a lot of her role is talking about what resources are available to caregivers and helping to connect people, but also to connect people to some of the national education that the VA is providing. So caregivers of veterans can access these monthly educational calls on relevant topics, like strategies for caring with my loved one with dementia, things like that. And then also the caregiver support program is now training up some people who are actively caregiving to be peer support over the phone to other caregivers, so that if you were wanting to be connecting with someone who is a peer, that would be available to you to have that phone support. But beyond that, the programs that I'm over, primarily how we help family members is to provide some services to the veterans that can then give the caregiver some relief. So the VA will pay for veterans who need it to go to adult day health care a few days a week. This can be a great break for a caregiver. The VA can pay for a veteran to have a home health aide to come in and provide some personal care, to get help with a bath or something like that as well. And so those services can then again give that caregiver some relief and a break. The VA also may arrange for someone to go for a respite stay in a VA nursing facility, so like at the Chillicothe VA, again, so the caregiver could potentially have a needed surgery or take a vacation or something like that. And then we also have a program called Home-Based Primary Care for veterans who are homebound and are not able to get in easily to the VA for their medical care. Then we will bring the primary care to their home, and it's an interdisciplinary team that includes a social worker and a psychologist, a dietitian, the nurse practitioner is the provider, and a nurse. So I think that also really supports the caregiver. They don't have to get their loved one into appointments at the VA, and they have that team to assess what's happening in the home and to try to help surround them with services that will help them to have the highest quality of life possible. So those are some of the things that we're doing at the VA.
Good. Holly.
Our program, which is called Caregiver Consultation, maybe this is a little overused, but we really feel strongly in calling our service person-centered, because just because someone's a caregiver, it doesn't mean that the approach that helps one person is necessarily the same approach to the other person. So our model is very simple, very old-fashioned. The person picks up the phone and gives Dan Burketti a call, either on his office phone or his cell phone, and Dan calls them back. Unless he's out of the country, which he does once in a while, he calls back right away. So that's just such a huge relief. And sometimes we feel a little guilty, but the person said, "Oh, thank you so much for calling me back. It's so great to talk to a person, an actual real person." So right away, that person-centered approach. And then depending on the family issue, the service might be primarily talking over the phone or talking by meeting in person, where Dan can help the person better understand how to cope with some of the stress, or even how to get communication going in the family more effectively. But other times the family might not need that. They might need clarification about resources. For example, the adult day health that was just mentioned, that can be a lifesaver for so many older impaired people and their families, but yet it's not well understood. So if we can help people understand that sometimes that there's another alternative, they may not have to think about perhaps having the person make a housing change. But speaking of housing changes, a lot of people, when they're frail and impaired, really do find that at some point in their life they do have a stay in a long-term care facility such as assisted living, and sometimes that becomes somebody's permanent home. So one of the things that Dan does is really help people not be afraid to put their toe in the water of looking at what does this mean and what's it like and how do you get started and how do you find financing and that kind of thing. So I guess in our program I like to say it's the only government-funded program with no red tape. And for us, we have a little red tape, but for our family caregivers, all they have to do is want Dan to give them a call, and then it's pretty easy for them to receive services.
Very good. And Ms. Patty?
Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, we have a specific program for family caregivers. It's the National Family Caregiver Support Program, and this was funded under the Older Americans Act back in 2000. So the program's been up and running for 13 years, and we contract with an agency in each of our 8 counties to be an access point for the services through that program. So in your yellow handout that you picked up, there toward the back there, or on the back actually, you'll see a list of all of the partner agencies where caregivers can go to for information about services, as well as to access a little bit of respite care. Respite care is just whatever is going to give the caregiver a break. And that can be a service coming into the home. It can be adult daycare where they go out, the individual goes out to a center for all or part of the day. It can be based in a facility for a short period of time if the caregiver does have to maybe see to their own medical needs or wants to go across the country to a wedding or something. We know these folks are really needing some extra time for themselves, whatever that might be, even if it's just to sleep. This program isn't the sort of all the answer. It is short-term kind of stopgap help. So the idea when someone reaches out to us through this program is to help them get connected with programs and services that are more ongoing for them. Often those programs are going to be care managed, where they have a go-to person, then a case manager, where they can access, who they can access to help them get linked with services and to continue to monitor a care plan and change the service plan as needed and that sort of thing. Under the caregiver program, we also provide at our agency here at the corner of 4th and Long Street, 174 East Long. We have a caregiver support group now that meets once a month, and actually there are 2 groups. One meets at noon on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and then the other one meets the same day at 5:30 in the evening. And we found that this has been a tremendous outlet for caregivers. This is for any caregiver. It's not specific to any particular medical condition, and we had seen that this was a really big need out in the community for caregivers. Gives them an opportunity to share, kind of to get some things off their chest and to learn from each other. And so that's one of the additional services under the program. You also, at the back, if you didn't pick it up, we put together this caregiver resource manual, the Toolbox for Independent Living. This is a series of workshops that we will take out to really any organization that invites us. They're free, and they address many of the key needs of family caregivers. One is just the first chapter is getting started, and that talks about all the different payer sources for long-term care and talks about the importance of planning so folks aren't having to make arrangements for help in the midst of a crisis. There is a chapter on preventing burnout for the family caregiver that talks about coping strategies to help them come out of caregiving a healthy, whole human being in their own right. Right inside, I want to point out that there's the Caregiver's Bill of Rights, and a lot of times I've told a caregiver to rip that off and tape it to the mirror and recite it every morning. because caregivers forget that they have needs of their own and that they're not going to necessarily be able to continue doing what they're doing unless they really budget that precious energy they have in the right way. And so we want to get them the help they need. We do, for this program, define caregiver very broadly. We're not talking about someone necessarily that's providing 24/7 hands-on care or even living in the home. Caregiving can be someone who's driving a loved one to their medical appointments, who's running in meals, who's doing the yard work. These are all, forms of caregiving. So, I think caregivers tend to reserve that label for the people that they feel sort of deserve it, who are, locked in the home day after day providing hands-on care. But really, this is a major time commitment for anyone who's assisting another individual who needs help. And it's to the tune of $450 billion worth of unpaid home care a year that families provide in the United States, and we can't replace that. So we have to support the caregivers. There's just no two ways about it. But the whole workshop series is in this handout. It's on our website. Folks can call us. We'll mail it out. We'll bring the workshops out to anyone who invites us to. And then the respite services, folks can go directly to the caregiver partners that I mentioned. And under those services, in addition to respite, we also can provide sort of a little bit of flexible help. Thankfully, when they added this funding into the Older Americans Act, there was a recognition that when you're a caregiver, your needs are all over the map. It can be anything. When you're responsible for the care of a loved one, any other little crisis that popped up in your life prior to that can be more of a crisis, because now you're responsible for the well-being of another human being. So sometimes that's going to be financial needs. We have a lot of caregivers who have given up work to try to provide care, and they're financially compromised. For this program, the caregiver is the client, not the older adult receiving care. Some services may be provided to the older adult, but it is the caregiver who is the client. So we're really trying to support that person. So sometimes we can do a little bit of emergency financial assistance, some help with medical equipment, vehicle modifications, some things like that. So we just say, call and we'll figure it out. Don't worry about knowing what to ask us. Just call. We'll get you to the right place and we'll sort out the needs and go from there.
Wonderful. We are very fortunate, it sounds, here in Central Ohio that we have the wealth of resources that are available to our families. Our next question is, we often see families who support or who provide support to elderly relatives. What about people who have no family members in the immediate area to provide support? Or, as Holly referenced earlier, the family members live long distances?
I'll just say a few words about that. Some of the other representatives here have programs that are called Aging Supportive Services or Aging Social Services, and my agency has that also. We have a very unique hybrid of combination of funding from both our local mental health system, the Franklin County Adam Board, and the Franklin County Office on Aging through the Senior Services Levy. We serve the zip codes in northwestern Franklin County, and other agencies serve the other zip codes. But what's really been wonderful at Centero is all we have to say to our community, if someone is 60 or over and they're having a problem, as long as it's legal, we can help them with it. We don't have to say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't fit in our category, you have to go to this agency for this, or we can help you with this, but not that. So a lot of times when people have no family, they rightfully may depend more on the social service network. And of course, if they have neighbors or a church family or that kind of thing, that's another great source of support. And the one thing I always love to preach, not always listen to, but if you can try to get involved when a problem is not happening yet, or you can prevent a problem, or when it's very small, it can be easier and have more choices. But of course, anytime someone is having an issue, there are some phone numbers besides the Area Agency on Aging or the local providers here in Franklin County. We have the Franklin County Senior Options Program that has a regular front door phone number. And if people call there, just like Patty said, if they have no idea what to ask, don't worry. Someone will guide you through and figure out where to refer you to.
Wonderful, thank you. Jamie, comments?
Well, I was going to just really concur about, I think a lot of times when there's not family locally, then you're also looking to identify other informal supports like the neighbors, and if they have a faith family that can help to support them. So I think you're just trying to see who else has been involved in that person's life, if someone has, and as my colleague said here, otherwise you are really relying more on the formal supports that are available in the community.
Thank you.
Again, I did want to give you that number for senior options, though. It's 614-525-6200, the one that Holly just mentioned about getting resources and calling them. I think that's very important for you guys as well as the people looking to us at home, that you have that number so you have access to that. Again, I think it's very crucial for independence and survival of our seniors as well as our caregivers that they do connect with those resources.
Kim?
I concur with everything that's just been said. I actually, statistically, 65% of our seniors rely on family or friends to provide that services. So there is that gap that don't have family or friends. And again, it's utilizing the resources that are out there, the Franklin County Senior Options Program, the Office on Aging, Passport Program, Julie's program, Holly's program, depending on what area town they live in. We service all of the west side, the east side, and southwest part of the county. And then Julie and Holly split it up. They take care of the rest of the county for us. So, but there are numerous resources out there to help the caregiver as well as the older adult.
And nationwide, all of the area agencies on aging are connected by a phone number and a website called the Elder Care Locator. And that's generally going to take you out to some of the focal point senior service agencies in whatever county you're looking for that help in anywhere in the United States. There are over about 650 of the area agencies on aging in the U.S. So every county is going to have one that serves them. And, when someone calls us, what, we're trying to do is get them as efficiently as possible hooked up with many of these organizations that are represented here. And in some cases, we may even resort to, if a family really does have the resources for this, there's kind of a new business that has sprung up, which are private fee-for-service geriatric care managers. We're fortunate to have some good ones here in this area that have been operating for a while, and they do for a fee what the case managers through our programs like Senior Options or the state Medicaid waiver programs do. But they can be a little more flexible in their services and can actually help long-distance caregivers out considerably because they can be the eyes and ears back home. They can facilitate moves, they can go in and do their own assessments, develop care plans, monitor those care plans, and report back to the family. If an individual moves on to a facility, they can go into the facility and do chart reviews and things like that to make sure that people are getting out to their medical appointments from the facility. And so they can be the eyes and ears sometimes when the families are a long way away. And so I like to let people know they're out there because they're kind of new, and their disciplines are kind of all over the map. Some are social workers, some are nurses, some are occupational therapists, but what they have in common is they know the typical services that are out there for seniors and where to go to get started. And in many cases, if they think someone does need a publicly funded program, they'll go that direction with it. So, and then they'll just kind of step out of the picture. They're all linked. If you want to do a search anywhere in the U.S., you can go to caremanager.org and do a search for them in whatever state you're looking for.
Very helpful information, ladies.
Angela, could I add
Yes,
something?
Holly.
It hasn't been mentioned yet, but I know several agencies have volunteer programs, and Centero's Older Adults Program has one also. We have about 100 volunteers. We need about 1,000, but we're always looking for more people. Of course, we do a background check and training and so forth, but sometimes the older clients that have no close family, or maybe they never had any children and no nieces and nephews, a volunteer can supplement a great deal what the professional staff can do, because let's say the volunteer has one person they're working with, they can devote a great deal of attention. But I also wanted to say, sometimes the volunteers can get involved even when there are family members involved, because the research has shown that the best combination for caregivers to avoid burnout is for their loved one to have a mix of formal and informal support. So we have families that are super families, very involved, but they still have a volunteer playing a part of the role.
Very good to know. Very good to know. Thank you. Well, Central Ohio has become the home to a great many new Americans. What resources are available to support families that may have limited English proficiency or specific cultural needs?
I'll take that one. Mostly, we have a wonderful, wonderful agency called CRC. It's the Community Refugee and Immigration Services, and their phone number is 614-235-5747. And they are amazing because they have interpreters, and not only that, but they also have, I call them society coaches. I don't know what their official term is. But so as I've noticed, there's a huge influx of Somali people that have come in, and obviously their life and their background and everything is completely different from anything that we've all seen or experienced. So they have coaches over there that can kind of help us communicate with these people and help them get what they need, but they also provide case management and services as well as interpretation services. There's also a wonderful other company that I've worked with that does interpretation services, and they're called Access to Interpreters. And their phone number is 614-221-1414. And they also have a variety of people that can do interpretation services. So there are a lot of other opportunities. I know that Chris also works with Life Care Alliance and their programs. Call me. I have lots and lots of resources if you have new Americans that come in. I have resources for the Latino community. I have resources for the Somalian community, the Asian community, everybody. So if you have any questions or have any kind of questions, from legal to where do they go for their groceries or whatever you want, please give me a call. And my phone number is 294-6347, extension 122. So please call me and I can hook you up with whatever you may need. And that really is the gamut of services. Like I said, legal services or caregiving services for the families that are bringing all their family with them, and housing and things of that nature.
Wonderful, thank you. Would anyone like to add to Julie's comments?
Well, in the community, there are some dining sites that are specific to different cultures. These are congregate dining sites. Some are set up, one is set up at an Asian restaurant, and there's a specific site for the Somali population. The congregate meal sites are great places for older adults to go out in the community who want to get a noon meal at a free or low cost, and have an opportunity to socialize with other older adults too. Sometimes there's transportation to these sites. And so that's one way we've tried to reach some newer cultures that are in our community. We maintain lists at our agency of some of the service providers that we use for the home services and adult day services to know who has what staff who are bilingual. So we try to meet that need that way as well.
Wonderful. Would anyone else like to add additional comments? Wonderful. Well, Holly touched upon this a little earlier, but our next question is, what can individual community members do to support your efforts? And Holly, I know you referenced volunteerism. That's a great way for us to get involved to support families with growing seniors in the household. But what are some other things that we can do with the other organizations to get involved?
I would say advocate. Pay attention to public policy that impacts seniors. And we have a great organization in the area. It's called Ohioans for a Better Future, I believe. And they track public policy that impacts vulnerable populations. And they do a lot of webinars that you can get a lot of updates on where current policy is around certain issues. Recently, we just got some additional funding, thankfully, here in Ohio for adult protective services, which was very badly needed for a long time. And they were tracking that and letting us know so that we knew, when it was time to maybe get on the phone and call your legislator. And that's certainly, I think, something all of us, just be aware. And then I think be aware of the seniors around you on a more personal level. Recognize that your neighbor's getting older and may need a little extra help, and kind of touch base with them. And, it doesn't have to be invasive, but just kind of checking in and how are you doing. And if there are weather, problems, and we've certainly seen some pretty severe weather lately, kind of checking in with your neighbors for that sort of thing, and making sure that they're all right. So just being more aware that, we do have this aging population around us who are sometimes reluctant to reach out for help, so sometimes we have to reach out to them. And certainly, as Holly said, volunteers. I think, so many programs could expand their services if we had a larger volunteer base. And again, I think, just having an individual sometimes just come and sit and be able to be a friendly visitor. It doesn't always have to be a major commitment, but that can be a lifeline sometimes. So.
Well, one thing I wanted to add in terms of how anybody in the community might be able to help. Earlier it was said that, sometimes we're still amazed that people aren't aware of what services are out there. And this is sort of the opposite of what Patty was saying about policy and advocacy. It's more grassroots. If somebody belongs to a formal group, like a church, for example, or even an informal group, kind of a coffee klatch, we'd be very interested in being invited, either to come and spend the whole hour or just have a minute. I know we've been invited sometimes even on the pulpit on a Sunday morning, and have a minute to tell the congregation what we do, or to hang out in the church during the time that people have coffee hour, or anything that somebody thinks would help. I know one time the Ohio Department of Transportation had a meeting, and they required their employees to attend, and because they were on the road crew, it was about 95% men. We were talking about the needs of older loved ones, and it was a real wonderful opportunity for us to talk about to the sons who don't often get looked at as being caregivers. So if you're in any situation where you could give us, and I'm sure the others would agree, a call to come and visit with you, and I know speaking for Dan and I, we're available all 3 shifts, 7 days a week. Just not all in the same week.
And also, ask the loved ones in your life if they served in the military. And then if they have, encourage them to consider enrolling in the VA. It can provide them access to some additional supports and services. And we know there are veterans out there that aren't getting any care services through the VA. So ask that question.
Very good. Very good. Well, tell us, what do families need to know and prepare for financially, logistically, and emotionally as their older and aging loved ones are getting towards the end of life stage?
I'll start out. Like Holly and Patty have both said, you want to take care of the problem before it becomes a crisis. And unfortunately, majority of our calls we get are crises, and it's a lot easier to take care of it before it becomes a crisis than after it becomes a crisis. So encourage your loved one to communicate their needs to you. Where would they like to be buried at? Where do they want their possessions to go? What kind of service would they like? Have they made the burial plans? They prepaid for their burial, you can do that. But talk to your loved ones and see, do they want to be kept alive by a machine? Do they want the plug pulled when they're no longer able to that quality of life left? And have them put these things in writing. I mean, there are living wills, durable medical powers of attorney, but those do not do any good if the person has not notified others, like their physician, that they have that, or the loved one that's caring for them. So communication is really a key issue here. And it's really hard to talk about death, but it's an important thing to do. Society is becoming more and more open about talking about death and dying. But those are important conversations to have with your loved one. Signing those advance directives, getting those in place. Also with banking accounts. Don't wait until there's a crisis and you can't access somebody's money for that. So get your name on a bank account with your loved one, or have alternative ways of being able to access that money if needed. The do not resuscitate. Make sure that living will is right there in place, and it's filed where the doctor as well as the loved one knows where it's at. Again, that's that open communication that you have to have, and what you want to respect that your loved one's wishes, and that only comes across if you're communicating with that person.
Additional comments from our panelists?
I just don't think it can be emphasized enough how important these conversations are. As Kim said, people tend to kind of steer away from these conversations because we are talking about tough topics sometimes. We're talking about health. We're talking about, changes in health. We're talking about a loss of independence and death at some point. But I think it's important to really look at this as an opportunity to do some planning that will help someone's wishes be honored down the road. And, sometimes you can do this, at a family gathering. I think it's good to have these conversations when everybody is in the same room and can hear the same thing at the same time, if at all possible. Because whoever's going to actually have the responsibility for decisions, if you can't make your own decisions, is going to need their support too. And so again, very important that everybody be on the same page. And I always use this as an example, but my father-in-law had made it crystal clear to every last one of us in the family what he wanted and what he didn't want. And when it came down to it, and there was an emergency, and he required a vent, he basically told them exactly what he wanted. And I said to my husband, I don't think that intensive care unit staff ever saw a family that large all on the same page. And as hard as it was to do what he had asked us to do, it left a legacy of cohesion in the family because we could support each other. We knew what he wanted. And I think that is just beyond value. And so I really would encourage you to learn about the advanced directives and how they work. And we can point you toward elder law attorneys if you need someone to do that kind of planning. So.
Great, thank you. Now, Julie had provided us with a series of phone numbers early on and organizations to come into contact with if we have questions. Can each of our panelists tell us, how can our audience members and people watching at home get in contact with you?
Well, since our program, the Caregiver Consultation Program, is staffed by one full-time social worker, we think it's easiest for people to just give Dan Burketti a call, and he's got 2 numbers. And his office number is area code 614-273-2957, and there is confidential voicemail. And then his cell phone also with confidential voicemail, area code 614-370-0856. And if Dan happens to be out of town, feel free to call me at Centero.
I'm going to give 2 phone numbers as well. First of all is Georgianne McCrary, the Caregiver Support Coordinator I mentioned. Her phone number is 614-257-5334. That's 257-5334. And then my phone number, and again, I'm Jamie Cooney, is 257-5389. 257-5389.
And you can definitely call me. My phone number is 614-294-6347, extension 122, and I will get back with you within 24 hours.
You can definitely call me. My number is 614-857-1246, and just feel free to give me a call, and I too will call you back within 24 hours.
And you can certainly call me too. My direct number is 614-645-7705. And then there's a toll-free number that also comes directly to me, and that is 1-866-750-2273. And then I'll give you our agency's number too, in case I'm not there. It is 614-645-7250. And then I'll give you the toll-free too, 1-800-589-7277. And most of those numbers are going to be in that yellow handout too.
Wonderful. So we've had an opportunity here to hear about the programs and services in Central Ohio to support our aging population. At this time, I would like to invite Attorney Louis Borowitz, representing the law firm of Baxter and Borowitz, to join us to speak to the complex legal and personal transition issues older adults and their family members encounter.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here today, and I will tell you, you could not have a better panel, more knowledgeable brain trust for elder services than you have here before you. So I would definitely urge you to keep their numbers handy, okay? I've actually worked with a few of them in my 10 years as an elder law attorney here in Columbus, and it's been a privilege. We are so lucky here in Ohio in general, but Columbus as well in particular. I say that because I have kind of a cross-section of knowledge. My dad lives in California, in San Diego, and you may have heard California is going broke, right? Okay, because of their constitutional issues. But the services, not only private, but also, of course, public and private, are so substantial here. The spectrum from home care through full care is incredibly robust, okay? So consider yourselves very fortunate. And our elders really, the biggest challenge I think that we have is getting the information out that these services, the spectrum, is available. And the best place for them to start is right here with these folks and getting educated. I'm going to go through two things, okay? I'm just going to make 2 points because I only have about 15 minutes. And the last time I gave a talk for the Alzheimer's Association a couple weeks ago. It was supposed to be an hour conversation, and it ended up being 2 with all the questions and interchange. So, but I will keep it brief. And it was already alluded to actually in the panel conversation, and that is the most important legal documents that an elder, frankly, that any of us can have in place is a power of attorney, okay? For health care, the healthcare directives, that's the healthcare power of attorney and the living will. Okay, a DNR was also alluded to by Kim as far as that do not resuscitate order. That's a little bit different animal, but it all works in conjunction with healthcare decision making. And then also the durable financial power of attorney, which was alluded to as well. I could talk with you about Medicaid planning and elder law and all these things and explain a dual overhead cam, intentionally defective trust for asset protection. It's not going to help you as much as having a basic power of attorney in place is going to help you. I am never more relieved than when a caregiver child comes into my office, as happens all the time, and I ask her, it's usually a female, as was mentioned, and I say, okay, have your parents or has your mom at least done a power of attorney? Because mom's already incapacitated. And thank goodness, most of the time, those basic documents have been done. But when they're not, and if that person no longer has capacity because they've had a severe health care event, boy, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. We can't do the necessary crisis planning. We can't do the asset protection planning or get them the benefits that they need without those basic documents in place. And so I would urge you, well, let me actually raise your hand if you have a power of attorney for health care in place, here in the audience. Ooh, okay. Those are actually available for free online. Go online. I think some of the the hospice organization, it's everywhere. Just put in Ohio Healthcare Power of Attorney. It's a basic form that's recognized by the Hospital Association, the bar, and across the board. So go online, if nothing else. Although I would urge you see an attorney. But minimally go get that form offline, okay? And with that, the healthcare power of attorney, there's also the living will, okay? The reason there are both, and let's just talk briefly about that. You have the healthcare power of attorney, and in that you name an agent. That's your advocate. You have to have an advocate. I'm an advocate for my father. He's now 82 years old. It's very, very, very important to look at the person that you're selecting as that healthcare advocate and make sure that they can make the tough decision when the time is needed, okay? At the critical juncture, and that was alluded to here, and I think Patty highlighted the importance of not only having the decision maker that's appropriate and can make that tough call, but beyond that, having the conversation with that decision maker so that you're confident that they can make the decision that you want, that they can step outside themselves and what they might want for your care, and they can actually step into your shoes, because that's their job as your agent. They're not deciding what they want for you. They're deciding what you want for you. Very important distinction, okay? So just choose that decision maker very carefully. And then have the conversation not only with that decision maker, but also with the rest of the family, if that's possible. And, you know, I counsel my clients every time that we do these documents and urge them to do so, and they always kind of shake their head like, oh, geez, you know, when do you slip that in? Right after, hey, pass the turkey. By the way, I have a DNR. You know, I mean, it's a tough thing to raise at times, and it's not a fun conversation to have. But let me tell you, the relief that you and your family, who is going to be charged with making that tough decision, is going to be huge relief, because you're going to be on the same page. It takes the pressure off of them to try and guess. That crisis is difficult enough to deal with. If you have to guess, boy, talk about, you know, ramping up the anxiety level. How comforting would it be to know, I know exactly what Dad wants. In this situation, I know. Huge relief. It's very, very important, okay? The living will is the part of the health directive that is in conjunction with the healthcare power. It doesn't appoint anyone to do anything. What it does is simply clarifies your wishes for end-of-life care. It says, if I am in a terminal condition or permanently unconscious, I declare to my doctors that I want this certain healthcare protocol. I want no artificial nutrition or hydration. In essence, I don't want to be artificially maintained. If I can't have the quality of life that I once had, and I've been diagnosed as terminally ill or permanently unconscious, just keep me comfortable, relieve my pain, okay? So if you want a lot of measures taken to prolong your life, guess what? Don't sign a living will, okay? If you're somewhere in between, what I would suggest you do is maybe highlight in your power of attorney specific things that you want, because there's actually a space in the Ohio Power of Attorney that says it's additional instructions to my agent for my care. Okay? So decide that very, very carefully. Take a look at that living will and make sure that the protocol that you're adopting by signing it is exactly what you want. Okay? Now, those documents can be changed and revoked at any time while you're alive and that you have capacity. Okay? So it's very important. Get those in place. The 80% of you that didn't raise your hand, go do it, okay? In the durable financial power of attorney, that is basically for your business affairs, okay? And that can actually assist. As an elder law attorney, a lot of times we're doing resource transfers and planning for Medicaid and engaging in spend down and kind of moving assets around in order to get qualification for different benefits. And having this durable power of attorney, and not just any kind of stationary store one, but one that actually allows for later life planning and enables that agent to be more flexible in engaging in elder planning, is very, very critical. Because, and typically when you do estate planning, the durable power of attorney is one of the included things in the basic arsenal of documents. You do your will, financial power or durable power, they call that, and then the healthcare directives. As an elder law attorney, I have fashioned a power of attorney that's very specific and enables the agent to actually do advanced planning with someone like myself if and when that elder needs to reposition their estate in order to obtain benefits. And those are not only through the VA, but also through Medicaid and other public assistance programs. So very, very important to have those in place to give your children, the caregivers, the flexibility to engage in that kind of planning and really maximize what it is that you can protect and the benefits that you can obtain. The other point I'm going to make, I think I'm okay on time, okay, is, and this was kind of the theme that I heard as I sat back there and enjoyed the conversation up here, which is selecting your advisors, okay? I have had the privilege of being a caregiver myself. I mentioned that I'm an advocate for my father as he's aged and experienced health care issues, but also for my mother in growing up. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 2 years old, and she has since passed away, but I had the privilege of being a caregiver for her most of my life. I would urge you, as you're seeking advisors, whether it be legal, whether it be social, program advisors, any advisor, ask them about their experience as a caregiver. Make sure that they're not just addressing the specific issue that you go there for, that they have a little bit broader picture, and that they can then listen and effectively get you to not only address the issue that's before them, but address the things that maybe you're not saying or that are implied in that interaction. So many times when I meet with caregiver children on elder law cases, it's what's not said that is so telling. And it's, ignoring their needs, as was indicated, with our panel here, is they ignore it. This is all about, I'm taking care of mom. Mom's got advanced Alzheimer's. She's wandering. She's incontinent. I mean, it's so challenging that they ignore exactly what's in front of them, which is their own health concerns, their own issues, their lack of sleep, because they're constantly have one eye open to make sure mom's not wandering out the front door. Is identifying then and getting those people the help that they need to address their own concerns, and making sure that you're not just looking, I don't just look at them legally. Yeah, I can take care of all the legal things, but the greatest service that I provide to my clients and to their families is as a counselor, not an attorney. And so I would urge you, as you're looking for professionals, is to look at that piece and make sure you're asking those questions to get in under what that person's really providing to you. Okay. That's all I have. Not too bad, huh? Okay. For an attorney, they usually go on like this, huh? Yes. What is your telephone number, please? My telephone number, yes, it is 614. Oh, this is my home number. I'm kidding. No, it's not. No. It's 614-431-8110. And you're an audiologist, aren't you? I recognize you. Yes. Yes, I've actually had people show up and want me to test their hearing. It's weird. No, I'm kidding. And my cell number is 614-406-8639. Try not to call that too late. I have 2 young daughters, 7 and 8 years old, so just, okay. Yes, Holly? Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have older clients who say they have nobody they can ask to serve as either healthcare or financial power of attorney.
Yes.
Do you know of any solutions to that?
Absolutely. And I've actually faced that with clients personally. I'm actually involved in a case like that at the present time. Did you all hear the question? You don't have someone to actually appoint as a power of attorney, as a fiduciary. Where do you turn? Sometimes advisors can serve in that position. I've had people like neighbors that will step up and fill the needs of typically what a family member or a child would fill. In this particular case, these were existing clients of my partner, Tom Baxter, who's been doing this for 40 plus years. And the folks had some issues. They had advancing dementia, and they needed assistance. They needed a guardian to make some decisions for them. And in counseling with their financial advisor and with Mr. Baxter and so forth, we actually opened the conversation to them, and they actually, by consent, they said, Lewis, you can serve as the guardian. They said, we will allow you to do that. And so I've actually served in that capacity. I also have a developmentally disabled gentleman who my partner Tom had worked with for years and years, promised his parents on their deathbed that he would continue to take care of and oversee affairs for him. I'm currently his power of attorney because he has no other family that's involved. So there are advisors that can step in. There are individuals who can volunteer if someone is indigent through the volunteer guardian program. If they still have capacity, obviously, to do powers of attorney, which is always best because then it's informal, it's non-restrictive. Then either friends or advisors can step into that role. But a lot of people don't want that responsibility too, so that can be a challenge, Holly. Mm-hmm.
You charge for that?
Do I charge for that? If it's an indigent individual, no. If they have resources, yes. Yeah. What I typically do is I'll delegate a lot of, if there's a lot of check writing or things like that, I delegate that to an assistant to keep the costs down for the client. Yeah. Yes.
What about, I have some clients that were at odds with their aging parent.
Yes.
And
that happens? That's bizarre. That never happens.
Really? What do you suggest for them? They're not going to, this particular client, there's no way his dad was going to give him durable power of attorney because he was very mistrustful of everything.
Okay. I experience that a lot. I get that a lot. And honestly, I mentioned my parents, and I will tell you, my parents couldn't have planned it better if they would have tried. I have 4 surviving siblings, and then myself. I'm the youngest and the only boy. Yeah, I know, guys. It was rough. It was rough. But so my parents had an elder law attorney as a son, a geriatric social worker for a daughter, one of the daughters, a geriatric OT for the other daughter, a realtor, a masotherapist. Okay, so talk about a really good core of service providers, right? And we're all very close and we all get along. But it took, from the time that I opened the conversation with my parents, it took them 5 years to basically pull the trigger on doing some planning, even though my mom had advanced MS. And it was a control issue. It wasn't a distrust issue. So you oftentimes face, if it's both control and trust, that's a real challenge. The trust thing is the biggest thing because when you give that power to someone, you're not giving up a power. And I think maybe that's where your inroad would be with talking with this elderly gentleman. You're not giving up the power. You're simply enabling someone else to, if you cannot make those decisions, to step in and assist with those decisions. Okay? A lot of people have that misconception that you give a power of attorney, oh, geez, now I'm out of the loop. I have no control over any of these transactions anymore. Absolutely not. It is simply extending that power. Yes?
I have 2 really short questions.
You only get one. No, go ahead.
My name is Celeste Washington. I'm not connected to any organization. I just came here to learn.
Okay.
What is your name?
Oh, I didn't even... Louis Borowitz.
Horowitz?
Borowitz with a B.
B-O-R-O?
W-I-C as in cat, Z as in zebra. I can't tell you how many times I spell that.
Does your office, you handle care for seniors. Do you also handle senior abuse cases?
I would be happy to sit down and talk about that. Yes. Yeah. I do some litigation and fiduciary litigation as well if there are issues like that. Sure. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I actually have a question for some of the panelists. I'm just curious, I haven't heard anything about how you help deal with pets in an older situation, and so many of them have cats and dogs and whatever else. What kind of challenges does that bring to the table when there's pets involved?
It's a huge challenge. It is a daily
challenge. My staff, including myself, have enlarged our pet families because of this. We have a few organizations out there that will help us through their foster networks that are already established through rescue groups that will help us relocate a pet. There are some organizations that are helping. Life Care Alliance has a pet assistance program for their clients with pet food, veterinary care, but it is only for their clients. But definitely we're seeing more and more the need to support the animal. I was a veterinary technician before I was a social worker, so this is a hot button thing for me. Because this bond is important, and sometimes it is the last meaningful relationship they have, our last intimate relationship they have. And we do see many people who are now, who have lost their housing, who are on the street because they won't go to a shelter because they can't take their pet to the shelter. They're making all sorts of different sorts of accommodations to try to hang on to that pet. So we're senior housing, we know they can have one pet. So if they transition into senior housing, as long as it's within the weight range of the facility or of the building, and sometimes that's a problem for an older pet. Sometimes moving a pet into senior housing, if it's a bigger pet, I tell people to talk to their doctor. If they can get the doctor to say that the pet provides them emotional support, even if it's a Great Dane, they may be able to get it into the apartment complex. So we really are very mindful and trying to network with other agencies that do help out with pet food and veterinary care, point people toward free and low cost vaccination clinics, all that sort of thing. But it is a huge need.
Well, if it's a Great Dane, then you could actually get him to diagnose it, or to use it for transportation as well. That's a huge issue for elders as well. Good question. Were there other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Louis, for helping us to plan and prepare for our senior family members. I know we did have an opportunity here for folks to ask questions while Louis was here at the podium, but I wanted to open the floor up again to see if any of you have general questions, whether they're elder law related or questions for our panelists. We do still have time available. Yes, and if we could I ask you to come to the podium, state your name and your question, or if you'd like, you can remain at your seat, state your question, and I will repeat it for you. Okay.
Just a quick question. I don't know which one's open. Just a quick question on the respite care that is provided. How is that funded? I've had over 6 years experience in the hospice industry, and I know what hospice pays for in respite care. So how does that work with the families and just anyone who can answer?
There is Title III Older Americans Act funding that provides for a lot of the services you see out in the community. Homemaker services, personal care, that sort of thing. There is Medicaid, and that's typically through the Medicaid waiver programs. In Ohio, there is a waiver program for people 60 and older, and then there is a waiver program for people under 60 as well. So that's our long-term care, home and community-based services, long-term care waivers. And then Ohio is kind of unique in providing a lot of senior services, including respite through the senior services levy programs. Not every county has a levy program, but most do. In Franklin County, that's Franklin County Senior Options, the 525-6200 number that was given earlier. Delaware County has a levy program, Senior Choices. And some of the other surrounding counties have their own levies. They're not care managed like they are here in Delaware and Franklin. So various funding streams. We try to just encourage people to call, and because they do have different financial criteria. Obviously, Medicaid is going to be vastly different. You're looking at state, federal regulations around Medicaid eligibility, financial eligibility. Title III is very relaxed and often just a suggested donation basis only. Levy programs, maybe sliding fee scale. So just let us know what you need, and we'll figure out what the most appropriate program is for you.
Okay, as a follow-up question then for anyone out there needing the services, can they contact any one of your organizations here?
Yes.
And then they can all figure it out exactly how to best make that happen for them?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
I will mention for veterans that we do. VA also does provide respite services to veterans separately and would fund that when they meet the clinical criteria as well. So.
Any additional questions from our audience? Yes, ma'am.
Virginia Metro AARP, and my question is to Catholic Social Services. The different services that you said that you have to offer, is there a fee for those services?
No, there's no fee for our services.
Okay, thank you.
And last call for questions from the floor. Let's give our panelists and our guest speaker a round of applause. Before we depart this afternoon, I just want to acknowledge the staff of the Community Relations Commission who are instrumental and really are the worker bees who work so tirelessly to plan and prepare for our lunch and learns. Ms. Gail, who's sitting in the back. As well as Neil Semmel. And I'd like to also recognize one of our community relations commissioners that stepped in during the session, Mr. Dr. Jindal. We also want to say thank you to Earth Fair Polaris for providing our healthy snacks for our entire Lunch and Learn series this spring and summer. Thank you all so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.